Hello, my name is Aaron and welcome to Board Games, Bricks, and Hobbies. Today we are creating the perfect Metroid Prime game. So to say I'm a fan of Metroid would be selling it a little bit short. After all, I've bought the Metroid Prime trilogy not once, but twice on two different consoles. Yeah, I don't have the Steelbook. It's been eluding me, unfortunately. But I've also played Metroid Fusion and Metroid Zero Mission on the Game Boy Advance, and Metroid Hunters on the DS, but we don't... I mean, it's better than Other M, but that's not really saying much. Anyway, so I wanted to take this video and break down what I want in Metroid Prime 4. Obviously, I'm not a creative director at Nintendo or in Retro Studios, so I'm hoping that the fourth one is going to be good. Metroid Dread came out to decent reviews. I haven't played that one yet, but I look forward to it since I recently did get a Switch. So, what makes a good Metroid Prime game? Well, I'm going to talk about things that I don't want to see and things that I do want to see. So let's go ahead and start with the first no. So the first thing that I do not want to see is I do not want it to be open world. It worked for Zelda. I don't think it would work for Metroid because Metroid revolves around unlocking certain items to progress through the world. And you can't really have a Metroid game without that sort of progression system in place. So to make it completely open world, I mean, you could if you designed it really well, but I just don't see how that could work with the mechanics that I like in Metroid. I like being able to unlock certain power-ups and then going back to places that I've been to previously and using them to unlock secret passages and extra expansions, things like that. I don't want an open world Metroid game. I really don't. It just doesn't mesh with the formula, and it doesn't really work in my opinion. So what's something I do want to see? Alright, so something I do want to see is I want to see the 100% completion go back to being based off of scans. In the first two Prime games, 100% was based off of all of your scans in the logbook. However, in the third game, that changed, and scans were now based off of pickups. And I didn't like that change. It just put less emphasis on adventuring, and so I want to return to logbook-based percentage, and I guess you could implement both of them if you want. Maybe have one ending for 100% pickups and another ending for 100% logbook, and a third ending if you got both of them. That could work, but mainly I just wanted the focus on exploration. I really liked going in and just investigating every single nook and cranny for bits of information, reading the lore, things like that. So let's talk about the next thing I don't want to see. So the next thing I don't want to see is another thing that was taken from Metroid Prime 3, is the stacking beam weapons. I didn't like just having one beam weapon the entire game. Yes, there's hyper mode, but that doesn't really count. It's a different mechanic. So I want... It doesn't have to be the original wave beam and ice beam, things like that. They could be new ones. In fact, maybe they should be new ones. But I want swappable beam weapons to make a return in the next Metroid Prime. I feel like it was fun to have bosses have different abilities based off of what beams you used, and just there were more ways to interact with the environment when you had more than just beams and missiles. So I want more variety in the beam weapons, and I don't want them to stack. I know the reason they did that was because of hyper mode and whatnot, but honestly, the swappable beam weapons would be a lot more fun in puzzles, in my opinion, so bring back those. What's the next thing I want in Prime 4? Hear me out on this one. I want replayable boss battles. Now, I know there's a lot of people that think that a boss rush mode or something like that would cheapen the game and make you less likely to replay it. But again, hear me out. The bosses are some of the most fun things in the Prime games. It's just, well, aside from those first few in the original, but those were mainly tutorials showing you how to lock on. Anyway, the bosses are really creative and innovative, and there's times where I just think, I really want to fight Omega Pirate again, but I can't without replaying the whole game. So if Retro were to introduce a boss fight mode, I think it would be pretty easy to just block access until you have completed the game. That would make it so that people have to play it through at least once. And another thing you could do is make it so that those bosses, you start the fight with the amount of health and missiles that you had when you reached that point in the game. See, I think this would add an interesting twist because you wouldn't be able to have people doing just just one energy tank final boss battles just for the YouTube hits, right? In order to get that, they would actually have to play through the game with just one or two energy tanks because it would save the state that you were in at that boss fight. And that would be the way that the boss fight would start when you entered the boss fight mode. So I think that would add an interesting wrinkle because in a way it would actually add more replayability because people would then have to replay the game if they wanted to fight the boss with maxed out missile tanks as opposed to just one energy tank and minimum just missiles. So I think that would actually be an interesting twist, and it would just be a lot of fun to be able to go back and play some bosses without having to go through the whole game again. So the next thing that I don't want to see is the Galactic Federation. Now, granted, they can be in it, but just as a backstory, a side character, just a brief memo in the logbook. I don't want the game to involve the Federation as actively as the third game did. It was just a bit too gung-ho, and I get that they were going for a big action set piece in the finale, but it just kind of ruined that isolation that I like from Metroid games. Just that feeling when you arrive on Talon 4 and you are completely alone with your ship, that is not there in Metroid Prime 3. Same thing for Echoes. Yeah, there's Lumos or whatever, but the game feels so dreary. And especially, even when there's other characters in the form of the soldiers that you come across that are all dead, you see their deaths, but you're still alone. And that element is lost with the introduction of the Galactic Federation having such a huge role in the third game. So take that out, make it part of the backstory, but don't focus on it. The next thing that I do want to see is I want to see more use of Samus's gunship. It was a pretty cool mechanic in the third game, and I liked being able to fly it around and land it and shoot missiles. It wasn't super versatile, but it added an additional element, and I think if you were to take that and put Samus in a more isolated area, it would be pretty cool. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we need a whole gunship shoot 'em up on rails section in the game. That's not what I'm saying. I don't want a Star Fox section in my Metroid game. That's not what I want. But I do think it would be cool to keep that command visor in the game. Alright, so the next thing that I don't want to see is multiplayer. Prime Hunters, that had multiplayer, and so did Prime 2, but it was incredibly lackluster. There were 6 levels, and it was pointless. So I don't want to see any multiplayer at all in the next mainline Prime game. Zelda doesn't need it, neither does Metroid. Just don't do it. If you want to add multiplayer, Nintendo, just make a sequel to Hunters and call it a day. Just don't put it in a mainline Prime game. This last one may be a bit controversial, but I want at least the option to have motion controls. Obviously, it would be on the Switch, but I want at least the option for motion controls in the next game, because I think they actually worked really well in the trilogy. And in fact, I have to shamefully admit that I never actually beat Echoes on the GameCube because I couldn't beat the Spider Guardian. The only way I could beat it was with the Spring Ball in Metroid trilogy. But anyway, so hate on me for that. But motion controls work when they're implemented well, and in the trilogy they are. So I think at least having the option to do so in the next game would be great. And for those that don't want it, just have the standard stick controls. It doesn't hurt anyone. So those are the things that I want to see in a Metroid Prime game. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments, and hopefully we'll get some news soon. In the meantime, hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you again in another one. You've been watching Board Games, Bricks, and Hobbies. Take care.